you pointed out, yes, last class, that they don't know what they're talking about, and he's the one that figures it out, right? Basically, they know some stuff, they know their specialty, but then that misleads them to think that they know all sorts of other things which they really don't. And since Socrates, in public, asks them questions that lead them into traps, the Socratic approach leads them into traps, and they end up saying just the opposite of what they said at the beginning of the dialogue, and everybody realizes it. Part of it's because they're drunk, usually, at these parties, right? And as a result, they're embarrassed in front of their friends or even their bosses. You know, if the rich people are paying them to teach their sons, and then this bum off the street, Socrates, just embarrassed the heck out of them. They're like, why am I paying you if you're such an idiot? You know. So of course all these different individuals get mad, and eventually of course they charge him with corrupting the youth, etc. Right? But so the early dialogues seem to really describe what Socrates did, and we get a sense of who Socrates was, right? Okay, that's good. Second set of dialogues, the middle dialogues, seem to be now Plato coming into his own and deciding he's got the answers to all these questions that Socrates couldn't answer. And that's where we get idealism comes from. So those still use Socrates as the character, but that's the kind of dialogue where Socrates is actually answering all the questions posed and saying what the answers are. And it's very boring, which is why it's funny when Steve Martin says, you all just sit around and no one will say anything, because it's always Socrates, what is, and how it's basically, these are boring dialogues. The earlier dialogues are like, you tell these people are really getting at it, right? But then you get to the middle dialogues and it's like Socrates just telling everybody all this stuff without anybody really criticizing. And that's when you get Platonic idealism, the theory of ideas. Idea, in Greek, means the perception of something, at least to begin with, right? So they have this idea. They see that black thermos sitting on the table, right? And so that's a perception of something. And when they're asking the definitions of things, Socrates gets upset with people because they keep giving specifics. This is a thermos. This is a thermos, right? No, that's not what I want. I want to know what thermos is. The idea of a thermos, right? You keep giving me specifics. I want to know the universal, right? The definition of it. And that's part of the reason they have problems figuring it out. Because if I ask you, what's real love? You end up with, the love that a father has for his children, or the love that a husband and wife have for one another, or a love that two partners have for one another, or but then you have the love of a painting. I love the Mona Lisa. When I went to the fair on Monday, I wanted to take a picture of the pumpkin, the big winning pumpkin this year. And it was so crowded, everybody all taking pictures and posing, with it, that I thought, this is worse than the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, Okay, that could have been funny, no one's laughing. And I was by myself, and I had a digital camera. That was the first year that digital cameras came out. It's called an Olympus. It looks like an old camera, but it's digital, right? But when I tried to take my selfie, how people hold up their cell phones and go like this and take their picture? When I do that, I can't see what is in the lens, so I have to hold it. So whenever I turn it around, I still don't get a selfie. It's always... That was a joke too. No one's laughing at any of my jokes today. I'm going to quit being a comedian. That's all there is. No, I want to know the universal. What is the definition of the thing? And for Plato, what will become an idea, this is Plato's idea, that ideas are universal, invisible. You can't really see thermos. I can see individual thermoses, but I can't actually see what it means to be a thermos. That's a definition. It's abstract. It has no matter to it, just like a point, right? Right? How did I get into that? It's a little bit of ahead of where I wanted to be. But in the Phaedo, talking about the soul. What is the nature of the soul? It's invisible. And as a result, it can't really die. In fact, Socrates allows that it's a 50-50 deal. 50-50 in the sense that, will there be an afterlife, or is this the end of it? For Aristotle, once the body dies, the activity of the body now has become the activity of a dead body. Very different, right? Trees have souls in the sense that they have sap that moves now today, and he didn't know this, that there's like a mother tree that literally somehow gives out carbon to its baby trees through the roots and stuff. It's clearly a conscious, can we call it that? Is it a consciousness? So I mean, clearly it has a soul. It's not the same kind of soul that a person has. It's not the same kind of a soul that a dog has, right? But whoever came up with the idea that only humans had souls, Descartes, I don't know if anyone else came up with that idea, but clearly other animals have souls. We know that they also have language, so they can think of themselves as a self, right? So if you think, at what point does a human being think of itself as a self? We typically say the mirror effect is the proof, the mirror test, right? And when does that really seem to happen? Around age 2. Before age 2, you probably don't think of yourself as a self. But at age 2, you've already learned that your name is Billy, or whatever, right? And you think, well, Billy needs the information, or Billy is, whatever. And when you look at a mirror, you see yourself, and you check it out, and you can tell, even with parakeets, when you have a parakeet and you have a mirror for a parakeet, I don't know why we always buy mirrors for parakeets, but they always sit next to the mirror all day, chirping to the mirror, and when they get seeds, they chew them up a little bit and they go onto the mirror. So at least once a week, you've got to clean the dang mirror because it's a mess, right? Conclusion, parakeets think that's a friend that they're talking to in the mirror, right? But go up a notch and buy a parrot. And parrots sit next to the mirror, but they don't say anything to the mirror. They don't try to feed the mirror. They know that reflection is them in the mirror, right? Depends on the parrot. I had a Quaker parrot for about 2 years. Had a vocabulary of about 500 words, clearly spoke in response to situations. That was amazing. My Rottweiler accidentally killed it. Don't let Rottweilers and parrots play with one another too much because it could cause accidents. And it was just a brief little movement like this, and the head went right through the skull, and the parrot looked at me and went, "Oh," and that was the end of the parrot. Very sad, because it was a real person. After that, Pico. Didn't know if it was male or female. Couldn't tell. But so souls, that's kind of cool. A lot of people today don't think there are souls because they think the souls are required to be magical, and they don't think that there's anything extra material in us. Steven Pinker, for example. Anybody thinking of doing Steven Pinker as their philosopher? Steven Pinker is a psychologist at Harvard. His wife, by the way, I think is a better choice. Rebecca Goldstein, she's really brilliant as well. But in any case, he doesn't think there are souls. It's just your neural network, and that's it. Just for fun, though, let me point this out. This is cool. There's a theory called the orchestrated objective reduction theory. You need that highlighted. So the first person that came up with it was the mathematician at Cambridge, Roger Penrose. He was the co-author with Stephen Hawking of A Brief History of Time. Familiar with that book? The one that became so famous, and Stephen Hawking was amazed that people were reading, physics, basically. And this is Stuart Hameroff. Stuart Hameroff is an anesthesiologist, and as a result of his job, he puts people under with anesthesia, and he points out that he gets paid for bringing them out. Putting them under anesthesia is not what people pay him for. They want to. That's the coming back out of it is the important thing. Of course, they have an operation, and he's sitting there monitoring them through the entire operation. He knows that they're unconscious, and once the operation is over, he brings them out, and he's also there then for a lot of their talk about what they just experienced, because a lot of people coming out of anesthesia will describe what went on as if they were conscious, and yet at the same time he's the one sitting there professionally knowing that they're unconscious. And so what he's doing is monitoring the microtubules in the neural networks and watching whether the amount of anesthesia is enough to put those asleep but not destroy them. You put too much anesthesia in there, the microtubules break apart and you're mentally brain dead, right? So don't do that. If you become an anesthesiologist, make sure you just keep the medicine enough that the microtubules are like, oh, but not, right? Pretty important, right? But once they come back, and it turns out that for some reason they were aware of what was going on, they almost always view it from above what was going on. They describe it. I mean, this is like factual content of people waking up from anesthesia. And as they describe the surgery, they could see it from above, or they heard a discussion going on in the next room, and so on. As a result, the two of them have linked up because for Roger Penrose, everything is made up of quarks, quantum particles, right? Everything is quantum particles, right? This is the new standard model, right? So we go down below molecules, we go down below atoms. What makes up an atom? You've got neutrons and protons and electrons, but then those are made up of quarks, the up and down, and charmed and so on, different quarks, right? Yes? You're familiar with this? And quarks are not material, right? Because atom is the smallest part of matter. Once you go below that, it's not matter, right? And it's energy in an arrangement, basically, right? And when you get to the microtubules, which are that part that contains the quarks inside our brains, microtubules are kind of like the cables going to a TV, when you're getting your channel through a cable, etc. So all the electronics is going through the cable. The cable has a cover that keeps interference from screwing up with the signal, right? So microtubules have like this cover that keeps the quarks inside from being interfered with by the